I'd like to welcome everyone today. I'm President Emily Stevens. I call this work session of June 3rd, 2026 to order. The time is 4 o'clock. I would like to remind everybody to please silence your electronic devices. At this time, we will do the flag salute. I would like to ask Trustee Zamora to please lead us. Before I open 1.02, is there anyone who did not get a chance to fill out a public speaker card? Looks like this. Please do so, as we won't be taking any more cards in the next minute for 1.02, adoption of the agenda. So give it a minute. I see somebody filling out something, so I want to be, okay, all right. So let's go ahead and open 1.02, adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? Trustee Dominguez.
Madam President, members of the board, I would like to make a motion to adopt the agenda and the amended agenda with the following change. Reference material has been provided for item 3.02, education and operational efficiency study final report.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Trustee Satori.
I'll second the motion.
Awesome. Let's vote. Trustee Bustamante Adams?
Aye.
Motion passes. With that, we move on to 2.01, approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any public comment cards they'd like to fill out? I don't see. Okay, no more public comment cards for 2.01. We do have one person for public comment on this item. Ms. Fabanon? No, 2.01.
Trustees and Superintendent Ebert, for the record, my name is Elena Fabunan. I am a retired CCSD educator, former principal, and District E constituent. Tonight, the board is being asked to approve the minutes from the March 30th, 2026 board retreat. Before that vote occurs, I would like to ask a simple question about transparency. Will the video recording of that retreat be posted on the district website? I ask this because the retreat was not live streamed, and members of the community have not had the same opportunity to review the discussion that took place. Yet a video recording exists. I know because I obtained it through a public records request. That raises an important question. If the recording exists, why should a member of the public have to file a records request to view a public board retreat? Transparency should not depend on whether someone knows how to navigate the public records process. Transparency should mean that information about public meetings is proactively shared and to the public whenever possible. This question is especially important because this board and district leadership have repeatedly emphasized trust, engagement, accountability, and transparency as priorities. Those values are not measured by what we say, they are measured by what we do. So tonight, I respectfully ask, will the March 30th retreat video be posted alongside the approved minutes? Will future retreat recordings be made publicly available? And if some retreat videos are posted while other retreat videos are not, what policy governs that decision? The public should not have to file records requests to watch discussions that occurred at public meetings. If transparency is truly one of our guiding values, then public access should be the rule, not the exception. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve section 2.01 of the agenda? Trustee Zamora.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a question, not a motion. Can we have some discussion?
If we open
Thank you.
discussion, then yeah.
Can I get clarification from the team? I know right after that meeting, there was a link on YouTube to be able to review the meeting, but it was not the correct video that was posted. Was that ever fixed?
Who is the question for?
The team, superintendent.
Yes, my team is indicating that, yes, the link was fixed.
So we are able to go back now and look at that retreat meeting on social media, on YouTube, sorry, to be clear, because that's where the link was not correct.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, so the retreat was never posted. There was a video posted that was a regular board meeting that was misidentified the date.
So the date that was used for the video was the one from our retreat, but it was the video of a work session. I do remember that, that it was a
yeah.
work session, but
Correct.
the date on the description was incorrect, is what you're
Correct.
saying.
Yep,
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve? Trustee Dominguez.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to motion to approve 2.01, approval of the minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I'll second. Let's vote. Trustee Bustamante Adams?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, that opens up now 3.01. This is not an action item, so we will welcome the team to come for their presentation. Oh, no, sorry, wrong one. Apologize. First one is the Audit Advisory Committee. So one of the things that we did with our policies was we said that the Audit Advisory Committee was one where the board did not have a liaison to come back to the board and do kind of a, an informative overview of what was going on like we do with all of our other committees. So we voted it in with our policies that we would have an appointee for this position. It wasn't one that would be voted on. It was just something that someone that the president would appoint. And so I did some due diligence, found that we had one trustee that's actually listened in on a few of these meetings and has agreed to dedicate time to this. And so with that, I will be appointing Trustee Dominguez to the Audit Advisory Committee as our board liaison. Okay? Is there any discussion on that item? Oh, Trustee Zamora.
Thank you, Madam President. Curious to know how we can move forward if someone has an interest in a committee, how to reach out to you to say, hey, there would be some interest in this situation.
When you say, okay, are you talking about interest to be the liaison or interest to be on the committee?
Interest in committees that are appointed by the president.
To be the liaison, like yeah, you would just email me. I mean, it was on the agenda, so we knew it was coming, but I didn't hear from anybody. Granted, in full transparency, nor did I send anything out that said, hey, who wants to do this? But it was, I looked at everything and I saw, pretty much everybody has something. And so it was who's going to be committed to this and who's going to work well with committee members and that sort of thing. And I didn't have any interest from anyone, so I just made the appointment.
Okay.
In the future, would it be, let me ask you this, in the future, would you like me to send out an email?
Yes, that's what previous presidents have done. They have sent out emails saying, hey, this is up for an open position more than anything. If you are interested, email me and let me know, just to kind of give everyone an opportunity more than anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trustee Esparza Stoffergen.
Thank you, Madam President. I think also a past practice, because some of the trustees have not been here before, has been the opportunity for individuals to say perhaps maybe not just their interest, but their qualifications for doing the position. So, it's after the fact, the appointment or recommendation has been made, and that is in our governance policies that the president made that decision. But my curiosity is, what would that individual's role be on the audit group? And then what would be the expectation as far as, because it's a new position, what would be their role and function in serving, because it's an advisory committee. So if there could be some clarity around that, that would be just helpful for us in the future, knowing that this is a new role.
So my understanding in our policy, and I don't know if Joe wants to, actually, I have it. I think he gave it to me. He did give it to me. Okay. So let me find it. Joe, do you know what section of this it's in? Oh, here it is. It's membership. Under membership, it goes in section D. This is governance policy GP 18. Section D, Roman numeral 2, it says the board shall have one board liaison who shall serve on the committee to be appointed by the board president. That's really all it says, and I think it mirrors some of our other policies. It's very simplified language. So they would act very similarly as our other committees, committee liaisons. So for example, just for the public's knowledge, I sit on the Bond Oversight Committee, so I don't make any decisions. I listen, I take notes, and then when we have work sessions where we ask everybody to come and report back on what's going on in that committee, as the liaison, I can provide that information based on sitting in on the meeting. It's basically a commitment to be at those meetings and to provide insight. And sometimes, you know, even in these committees, sometimes the committees will ask the board liaison questions like, hey, does the board want to see this, or would the board be interested in this? And it provides a way to kind of have that level of communication that wouldn't exist otherwise. And in this situation, didn't exist at all.
And just because I received some questions, because it is a new role, I want to provide some context and clarity that that is definitely, as an advisory role, is not a voting member, just like it would be in any other trustee representative. And I just appreciate Trustee Zamora saying that it really would help to have a process and a procedure going forward for all of what we're doing, even if it's a new role or position, so that all members have an opportunity to apply and maybe have that equal access, despite if people don't have roles or do, because everybody's schedule is a little different and their interests are different as well. So I appreciate you mentioning that. It does provide a little bit more consistency. Thank you.
Trustee Bustamante Adams, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, as I see nobody else in the queue, we'll go ahead and close 3.01, and we will open 3.02. Now we will take on the presentation.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As the team gets assembled here to be able to present, I wanted to first have a note of gratitude to the Board of Trustees. Thank you for approving this work back in January for us to be able to move forward. As you know, all of our team members in the Clark County School District are tasked and do a great job. But there isn't enough time in every single day for people to go deep into the work that is here, and many of us, like myself, are new to this role. We have Deputy Gonzalez, we have Deputy Dr. Jesse Welsh as the two deputies who are both new to their role as well. I think they've done a phenomenal job for the first year, so congratulations there. But I also wanted to have a huge note of gratitude to the entire team. It was a lot of late nights, a lot of conversation back and forth. Did the Gibson Group dig into areas that really needed, that we wanted to know more about ourselves? And so I'm very thankful to, you've got probably 25 folks back there that spent a lot of time working to make sure that within this body of work, right, it's not going deep into every aspect of the Clark County School District, the 5th largest school district in the nation, but it is to look across the entire school district. They found some places where we're doing well, but right now we're looking at those places where we can do better. And so with that, I'd like to turn the time over to Deputy Superintendent Felicia Gonzalez.
Thank you, Superintendent Ebert. Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Ebert, Felicia Gonzalez, Deputy Superintendent of Business Operations for the record. I am happy to introduce this item. Actually, the work for this item began immediately after approval. It started in January and just recently concluded. And so I am, at this time, I'm going to kind of orient us on how we're going to proceed with this presentation. We are going to first dive into the educational recommendations, and then the team will change out, and then we'll bring forward the team that did the work for the operational efficiency study. So at this time, I'm honored to introduce you to Greg Gibson of the Gibson Consulting Group. Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Gonzalez. Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Ebert. My name is Greg Gibson. I'm president and founder of Gibson Consulting Group. We're an education consulting and research firm based in Austin, Texas, but have employees scattered all over the country. My role in this project, I was project director. I was also involved in several of the areas, so you'll hear back from me later in the presentation. And at this time, I'd like to pause and let my team introduce themselves and their role on the project.
Good afternoon. I'm Katie Mackey. I'm an academics partner at TNTP, and I am here alongside my colleague Carmen Orozco, who's also a partner at TNTP. And we played a role in supporting the Gibson Consulting Group with the educational opportunities.
I'm Kathy Malerba from Gibson Consulting Group. I'm the Executive Director of Research and Evaluation there, and I oversaw the educational components of the project.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Alexander. I am a lead consultant for Sped Direct Consultants. I had the opportunity to work with this team on the aspects of special education within the project.
Good afternoon, I'm Will Hardaway. I am the Executive Director of Consulting at Gibson. I oversaw our human resources work as well as the English language learner work on this project alongside my colleague and subcontractor, Dr. Mirna Rasmussen.
Thank you, team. First and foremost, thank you for the opportunity for us to do this work for you. And we believe this study was timed really well in the juxtaposition of against declining enrollment, a strategic planning effort that was underway. We really hope that our work will help you accomplish your goals outlined in your strategic plan. And so we really look forward to not just giving you a report, but giving you some recommendations that we hope will provide you lasting value. We identified some major opportunities that should provide significant returns on your investment in us, particularly in improving student achievement and saving money to the extent of $80 million in annually recurring general fund savings compared to your one-time investment of $1.4 million on this project. Before I start with the presentation, I want to acknowledge a few people, one of whom is sitting to my right. Deputy Superintendent Gonzalez was the liaison for us for this project, and I think she likely consumed many more hours than anybody else in Clark County School District. And it's so important, this is such an important role, because we work hard, but it's hard on our clients when we do this work, and particularly the project liaison. And Deputy Superintendent Gonzalez has just been wonderful to work with. Our site work went very smoothly. We were always able to connect with each other when we needed to. And so I'm just very appreciative of the project success that was due to her efforts. So I wanted to thank Deputy Superintendent Gonzalez The other thank you in the district, and for an individual, is Christopher Huffman. Christopher was our data person, and we look at a lot of data on these projects and a lot of documents, and Mr. Huffman drew the short straw and was the one who led not just the extant data collection, but also the document collection. And I think I stated during our status update meeting with you a few months ago that we have never received data this fast on a project. And so it is such a stunning accomplishment. And I just really appreciate that, because this project had a tight time frame. And so we needed the data within a particular time to be able to be successful in our work. So thank you, Chris. There are many others, department heads, program leaders, administrators, principals who all participated in this work. Were very gracious for their time and input into the study, as well as some external stakeholders that we interviewed as part of the project. I also want to acknowledge the contributions of our 2 project managers who were unable to attend today. Samantha Boss, who had a little boy in April. She was our project manager through April 1st. We had 2 project managers when we started because of the intensity of work during the first few months. Shannon Johns took over that role April 1st and worked with Deputy Superintendent Gonzalez for the remainder of the project. And so they were the ones that carried the heavy project management lift from our end. We also had many others that worked on this project that I won't take the time to name here tonight, but I'm also appreciative of their efforts and contributions. So we'll start the presentation. I'll do a quick overview of the project. Much of the information, or about half the information in the overview, is information you've heard before when I gave you the status update, but I just wanted to ground you again in the objectives and the approach for the project. Then we'll go through, this team sitting next to me, my education team, they're going to walk you through the educational recommendations. And then we'll pause for questions. As Deputy Superintendent Gonzalez just pointed out, we'll pause for questions. This team will sit down, and then my operations team will come up, do their presentation, and be available to answer questions after that. So the questions appear at the end, but they're actually coming after each segment of our presentation. These are the study objectives that were listed in the request for proposals that we responded to. Improve student success, assess how well financial and staffing resources are aligned with priorities, evaluate how people, time, and money are organized and managed to determine where we could be more effective, efficient, and timely, and then strengthen budget strategy, transparency, and return on investment. The study objectives, and these were in our proposal. Our objective was to not give you 50 to 100 recommendations that we thought would be a heavy lift. So in our proposal, we decided to propose an approach which was accepted, and we were excited about it, to focus on the 10 to 12 most significant things that we can recommend to you that are either going to do one of 2 things. One is significantly improve student achievement, or 2 is to save significant amounts in annually recurring general fund cost savings. So the significant ended up being 10 million was the threshold. We have one recommendation, you'll notice from the report, that is slightly less than 10 million, but the lift was so light for this recommendation that we felt like that was really important to include in the report. So that's what this report is. What this report is not, it wasn't a comprehensive performance audit of every program or department. So when we started our work, we cast a very broad net. We asked for data across all areas. We did interviews across virtually all major departments and areas. And so we didn't come in with a narrow focus. We came in with a very broad view. We wanted to see where the data took us, where the information we learned during interviews and focus groups and classroom observations took us. And then the objective of that phase was to identify the 10 to 12 major opportunities. So, but you'll notice that the report's not organized by program or department. So it's organized by educational recommendations and operational recommendations, which is the title of the study. This also wasn't a compliance audit. We were not charged with determining compliance with any laws or regulations. And so our focus, again, was on these 12 major areas. The educational work we did really didn't constitute what most people think of as a formal program evaluation. We did an assessment of these programs. And so it's important that while we incorporated some research disciplines into our work, they don't really meet the definition of a formal program evaluation, nor was that the charge. Our charge was to do an assessment, educational and operational efficiency assessment, and that's what we did. The two phases are important because, as I mentioned, phase one was a really cast a broad net to identify the opportunities. Once we identified the opportunities, we started phase two, and phase two was a really interesting and important part of our work. Once we identified these opportunities, we actually collaborated with your team, your administrators, to do three things. One is to kind of convert these opportunities into actionable recommendations. The second was to do some implementation planning. We had some ideas about implementation strategies. We wanted to talk through those with your department heads and program leaders. And the third was to, where there were recommendations that had a fiscal impact, we wanted to collaborate in terms of walking through and solidifying the fiscal impacts that we applied, that we estimated for this project. This was our project schedule. It was a short time frame. We started in, you approved our contract on January 8th. We started the 9th, or maybe the 11th, the following Monday. But it was a quick start. I think I reported to you we were close to being toward the end of phase one in our status report to you earlier. We finished our work in May, and I'm excited to be presenting the results of our work to you tonight. These are the peer districts that were used. You'll see, in addition to the report, there are 4 appendices. There are 2 educational appendices and 2 operational appendices. Each of them has a trend analysis and a peer analysis. And so, and these were the districts that we selected to be the peer analysis. And we collaborated with the district. Although we made the final call, we did collaborate with the district in identifying peer districts that would be meaningful. I am going to pause now and turn the presentation over to Katie Mackey, who will start with our first recommendation.
Thank you. For this portion of the study, I'm going to focus on recommendations to improve Tier 1 instruction. The team conducted 115 classroom observations across 12 schools. We also reviewed district tools and guidance and resources, gathered feedback through stakeholder interviews, teacher focus groups, and school leader conversations. There are 3 key headlines from our findings. First, CCSD has high-quality instructional materials and curriculum in place, and this is a really important strength for the district. These resources raise the floor for what students experience across classrooms, but they cannot by themselves significantly drive student outcomes. Second, the main opportunity is implementation. In the observation sample, 67% of reviewed assignments included grade-appropriate content, and only 39% of lessons demonstrated strong instruction. So the challenge here is not simply whether grade level work is present. The challenge is whether students are consistently supported to engage deeply with that work. And third, instructional practices often placed most of the thinking on the teacher rather than on the students. And so students were responsible for the thinking in 14% of literacy classrooms and engaged in key mathematical practices in 33% of the math classrooms we observed. Our recommendation 1 is to strengthen the implementation of Tier 1 instruction in literacy mathematics through 5 key strategies. The first implementation strategy is to establish and communicate clear commitments for strong Tier 1 instruction. These commitments should be content-specific and practical. In literacy, that means naming the practices that support strong reading and writing instruction, like explicitly teaching foundational skills and knowledge building and comprehension. In mathematics, an example would be practices that support conceptual understanding and problem solving. The second strategy is to align systems of observation and feedback to these commitments. CCSD has multiple observation tools. This recommendation is not necessarily to replace them, but rather to narrow the focus and align them around a clearer picture of strong content-specific instruction in math and literacy. Classroom visits using observation resources should focus less on checking for required components and more on the student experience. What are students doing? Are they engaged with the full intent of the standard? What are teachers actually doing to support them? The third strategy is to build educator capacity through content-specific and practice-based professional learning. This responds directly to what we heard from teachers across the board. They want supports that go beyond learning the materials and the platforms where the materials are housed. They want professional learning that helps them bring the materials to life by understanding the demands of the lesson, planning how the students will actually engage with that lesson, and then making instructional decisions that support students to access grade level instruction while maintaining the rigor. An important distinction in this strategy is that materials and curriculum are one vehicle for living out CCSD's instructional vision, but they don't serve as the vision themselves. The fourth strategy is to improve system coherence. Teachers and school leaders, as you know, are navigating many tools, many resources, trainings, and many messages. So our recommendation is about narrowing those priorities, aligning all of the supports around them, and significantly reducing fragmentation. Finally, CCSD should strengthen Tier 1 instruction for students with unfinished learning while maintaining grade level rigor. Teachers consistently described how challenging it is to support students who are behind grade level. The recommendation is to provide clear guidance and supports on how to scaffold students into grade level work without reducing the rigor. Overall, the goal is to move from strong materials to consistently strong instruction and therefore to stronger student outcomes.
Okay, so I worked with Julie on this project, and we looked at the data and had the opportunity to divide and conquer and visit your campuses and take a look at different service delivery that was being provided for students in special education, and to come up with a lot of the recommendations. We also had an opportunity to interview your staff and talk to them about what you were doing in the district currently, what they had been seeing, and really had the opportunity to engage in some deep conversations. In looking at this, one of the things that comes for some of the first recommendations comes from considering least restrictive environment. Federal law requires that students with disabilities are educated in their least restrictive environment, meaning they should only be removed from general education when their needs cannot be met in that setting. However, looking at your district data, it showed a shift toward more restrictive placements So between the school years 2021 and 2022 and 2025, 2026, the percentage of students with disabilities spending more than 80% of their time in general education per day has declined, while more students are now being served in a more restrictive setting. Compared to peers, your district has the lowest percentage of students accessing general education for most of the school day. And that's how we started to look at some strategies and make recommendations around this particular area. Current special education staffing approach did limit your service delivery, and as a result, there is that trend toward the restrictive placements. I'm ready for the next slide, sorry. I'm on it? Yeah. Is it already on it?
Are you ready for that?
Yeah, I'd already said all of that. Yeah, sorry. So in order to implement the strategies, it really becomes a mindset shift first. So you want to do an architecture to improve coherence and efficiency and alignment, and to establish and communicate a vision for improved practices and shared responsibility that really begins at the general education level, and to redesign some of the special education programming and student learning supports, and ensure that placements decisions are driven by student need rather than program and program environment, and having that opportunity to have those valued discussions in IEP meetings to determine what the students really need and seeing what those services can be provided in general education. We do recognize that at the same time, your district has experienced a 54% increase in the number of students with disabilities, largely driven by growth in autism identification. And existing staffing models are limiting how services can be delivered. And so as a result, your schools are more likely to rely on restrictive settings than providing supports with general education environments. And in addition, some of our classroom observations indicated that implementation of special education programming is inconsistent across campuses and not always aligned with the procedures manual that you have in place to lead variability in how students are experiencing the services. So to address the challenges, I just shared some of those recommendations, and your key strategies would include clearly establishing and communicating district-wide vision for inclusive practices, redesigning programs to align with that vision, and ensuring that placements are consistently driven by individual student needs rather than their environments.
Our next recommendation relates to English language learner programming. Across both ELA and math, there is a large and persistent gap between ELL and non-ELL students, and it hasn't meaningfully closed over time. On the most recent state assessment, about 14% of ELL students were proficient in ELA, compared to just over 50% of non-ELL students, and math shows a similar story. Board Policy P6165 establishes the district's responsibility to ensure that ELL students are meaningfully participating in grade-level, academically rigorous instruction. The policy also calls for a system that eliminates achievement gaps. This data shows that is not happening. What's important here, Greg, if you could go back to this slide for a second. What's important here is not just the size of the gap, but the persistence of it. This isn't just a single-year issue. It suggests that our current instructional model isn't accelerating outcomes for ELL students in the way that we'd expect. When we look beyond test scores to language development, we see the same story. More than half of ELL students, about 55%, have shown limited or no growth in English proficiency over the past decade. The report points to a critical factor. Language development is not consistently embedded into daily instruction. It's often treated as a separate support, and progress monitoring during the year is inconsistent. So in practice, we are relying heavily on an annual assessment, which limits the ability for teachers and for leaders to adjust instruction in real time. Our recommendation is to shift the model to a district-wide content-based language instruction framework. At a high level, this means shifting language development from a programmatic add-on to a core instructional expectation. It sets a consistent standard that students are building language at the same time that they are engaging in grade level content. From an implementation standpoint, we have a few key actions to focus on. First is establishing a clear district framework. Among other things, this includes requirements for including language objectives into all Tier 1 instruction. Secondly, embedding CBLI expectations into principal coaching and to other various teacher supports. Third, using school improvement planning to drive accountability. Assembly Bill 335 requires schools to set ELL goals. We believe this is a critical lever in moving this recommendation forward. And fourth, strengthening how we monitor language growth during the year so instruction can be adjusted earlier. Ultimately, this is about moving from a program-based approach to a system-wide approach, where language development becomes a shared responsibility and ELL students have better access to rigorous content and stronger academic outcomes.
I'll focus on the recommendation regarding the district's partnership with Acceleration Academies. Acceleration Academies is an alternative education program that helps credit-deficient students get back on track for on-time graduation. It offers flexible year-round learning plus the academic and personal support that students need without the constraints of a traditional school day and school year. Their model's designed to be revenue neutral to the district. The program receives 90% of the state funding for participating students, and it covers all of its own program costs. In the 5 years we examined for the study, the program's grown from just under 600 students to over 2,000 students in the current year. The credit earning target for program students is 1/2 credit every 21 days. At that pace, students could accumulate up to 17 half credits or 8 full credits over a calendar year. However, our analysis showed that students who enrolled in the program often earn fewer credits than this. Of the 1,400 students who've graduated from the program, 51% did meet the goal of graduating on time or early, while the remainder graduated late. The most recently reported state data show that over a quarter of program attendees dropped out of school. So while the program, thanks, Greg. While the program clearly helps some students make progress toward on-time graduation, the program does not work for everyone, and the funding model constrains CCSD from investing in school-based supports for credit-deficient students. We recommend that the district modify its partnership with Acceleration Academies to identify and refer students who are most likely to benefit from their model. We also recommend that the district, region, and school leaders work together to understand the complex needs of credit-deficient students and develop additional school-based program options. Monitoring success for both Acceleration Academies and district-developed programs will look very similar. The focus should be on consistent participation and attendance in these programs, credit earning, and of course, progress towards graduation. Long-term success would focus on changes in dropout rates, graduation rates, and positive post-secondary transitions.
Okay, at this time, I will turn it back to Mr. Gibson and his team for questions related to the education recommendations.
I'll open it up to discussion with my colleagues. I don't see anybody in the queue. I'll start. Under the special education, when you talked about the challenges, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard you mention personnel, but I didn't see anything in the recommendations about it. And so just wondering, because, we hear different things from folks saying, well, we need more people in the classroom and stuff like that. But I was just wondering if there was any other data around that. It was mentioned, I thought.
I'll start the response to that. Since there was a potential fiscal implication, we really weren't in a position to evaluate the specificity of you're going to need this many more teachers to do it. We kind of got to go through the process of identifying where there's opportunities to serve these students in a less restrictive environment. And then once we go through that process, we'll be able to quantify that. So we're not in a position to tell you today, you'll need this many more special education teachers, less restrictive environment or inclusion classrooms. You need support for those teachers, for the gen ed teachers. And so that is a different staffing model. And it could be more expensive. So the implementation of this could depend on, the number of teachers that you might need, the ability to reallocate resources from one program to another, and then, of course, funding for the program is also a driver in how much you can spend and how fast you can do these things. I don't know, Jennifer, I don't know if you have anything else, but I wanted to set the financial context.
Right. It's one of there was an implication in the report that this could be 5 years to make some of these changes and some of the recommendations. But what you would look at is more of a reallocation of resources. It could likely have a budget implication as you're changing, so it would need a phased in really thinking about how you would like to approach that. But over time, the more students that are served in general education and getting needs met there, both the student outcome and cost benefit could potentially show over time. But initially, it's likely it could be an impact.
So the reason I bring it up is because we're about to go to session. And these are one of the things that we're talking about when we say we need more resources. So when we talk about these resources, especially around special education, I'm trying to understand, because our legislators want to know, what are you going to use the money for, right? So do we need more staff? Do we need it for training? Do we need it for these resources? So I appreciate the candidness about, maybe this is a phase 2 as you get more data and you look more into this. And then my second question, and then I'll put myself back in the queue, is around the ELL students. So you mentioned on here that there was the WIDA access results showed more than one half experienced limited to no language proficiency growth. That's pretty staggering. I'm just trying to understand the gap. So the other 46%, was it significant growth for those students and it's just a big gap, or was it very minimal? Do we know that?
We actually do have that broken out, figure 7 on on page 28 in the report. The combination, that 55% comes from we have actually 5 different groups, but you can see always declining, you can see mostly declining, and so we tracked the growth progress for individual students across all 10 of those years, and then grouped them based on that, whether they increased or decreased or stayed the same. And so you can see the breakdown on that in that figure.
Thank you. Okay, I will turn it over now to Trustee Satori.
Thank you for the presentation very much. I had a couple of questions about the Acceleration Academies. I'm not as familiar with those, so where are those located? Can you give me a little more background on those? And then you mentioned about targeting the students most likely to benefit, and I was a little unclear on how they're currently identified.
Thank you for the question. I did visit all 3 of the open enrollment sites, but I don't know if I can quote their addresses to you. But they are spread around the district. I feel like, well, I don't want to misspeak. There are 3 open enrollment sites. That's correct. I'm not entirely sure I can speak from memory about how they're referred to the program. I know that there are close connections between the counseling teams at each of the high schools and then the receiving counselors on the Acceleration Academies side. So there is a formal process there. There are also other ways that students are referred to the program, such as the districts sharing the did not enroll list. So the Acceleration Academies can go out and pursue students, look for them in the community if they did not show up for school at the beginning of the school year. So the transfer from the high school is only one of the ways that they might, that a student might end up at Acceleration Academies. Students can also self-refer. they can choose to go there on their own.
Trustee Satori, also, Acceleration Academy gets an extract from our Infinite Campus of students that separate from the Clark County School District. And as Kathy said, we do send them lists regularly throughout the year so that they can reach out to the students so that they can get them to participate and bring them back into the education system.
Okay, Trustee Esparza-Stoffergen.
This feels like deja vu. I mean, I appreciate the hard work. You are right, Gibson. You were here back in 2012, or 2011, I believe. I think I was at a building at that time. So thank you for what we know, what is validating what we need to do better. I have a lot of questions. So start with some broad ones. We had a high-level briefing the other day. And I am encouraged by the fact that there could be potentially $80 million over a 5-year period of time in the entire in totality of all of the recommendations, if they were all implemented. One of the biggest questions that I think, because this was posted and people had time to digest it, is looking at, are the efficiencies that are going to be implemented in the classroom, how will we ensure savings that are actually going to move closer to the students and potentially reduce those expenses? And will it be reinvested in the classroom? So people want to know if we're saving instructionally in that particular area for efficiency, will that potential funding and cost go back into the classroom? And I think that's the big question with all of the savings that we may have over time. That's my first one.
Let me first clarify that all of the savings, cost savings we've identified are operational cost savings.
Instructional. So any of the instructional savings, will they go back into the classroom?
But my point is, we have not projected instructional cost savings. We've only estimated operational cost savings. So I skipped through the fiscal impact table in the slide deck because all of those relate to operational savings, which you haven't heard about yet.
Okay,
How the district chooses to reinvest those savings is really up to the district.
right.
And so we hope that from these recommendations, we think there could be, and we'll talk about these later, some other recommendations that could have a direct financial benefit that could also help you reinvest those in instruction. So those might be able to help support some of these changes that we're talking about. But there are no recommendations in our report related to educational programs that have a cost savings attached to it.
Okay, understood. Thank you for that clarity. So I'll put myself back in the queue because I want to go specifically to the other categories that were kind of raised earlier.
Okay?
I'll come back.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Zamora.
Thank you, Madam President. Superintendent Gonzalez, I think that my first question is probably for you. The 12 schools that were observed, can you tell me what regions they were in? Was it kind of just spread out all across?
We did provide a variety of schools in all different areas and even rural.
Okay. Thank you for going to the rurals. I appreciate that. I don't have rural schools, but I know my colleagues do. My second question is the redirect of, I think, resources from Acceleration Academies. How do you envision that? Like, where would we redirect those resources?
Thank you for that question. So that will definitely be discussed in our implementation phase after we start working on the recommendations from this report.
Thank you for that. So we will get more into details in the nitty-gritty later on. Yes.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Trustee Bustamante Adams, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Just want to say thank you to the superintendent and the deputies. I think this is another step forward for us as a team. And I'm really excited because we can continue to prove that we are good stewards of the public's money. So my question has to do on page, it has to do with the comparison schools. And my question is, you know, I noticed that Chicago was not on there. I don't know what their size is, but I was looking at maybe the highest population of schools like Chicago, like Miami-Dade, why those weren't included versus Dallas, who has like 139,000 kids. So that's one question. My second question has to do on page 8, where it said, I can't remember the individual, it might have been Katie, that said there was a 54% increase in kids with special needs. So my question is that data in the 87-page report where I could go back and look at what the number used to be and what that 54% includes? That's a second. And then my last question has to do with the Acceleration Academy. So in our briefing, from what I understood, you said it increased from 600 to 2,000, and that it's costing us as a district $20 million. My question is, and I think Deputy Gonzalez answered it, but I want to verify, is that child drops out of CCSD, and then Acceleration Academy goes and reclaims it, and then we work out a partnership for that individual, and that partnership is access to data. I think it may include shared revenue from what we get from the state on a per pupil. The list of schools that we compared, why were maybe not Chicago and Miami-Dade not included? Number 2, the 54% increase, is that data in the full packet? And then the third one about verifying that the student drops out of CCSD and Acceleration Academy goes and reclaims that student, and then we have a shared model with them that includes maybe data and revenue.
We can answer the first two. I think the administration can best answer your third question about the funding. The peer district selection, this is always, it's difficult to find the right peers. So the natural inclination is to pick all the other really large school systems. And I believe 15 years ago we did. We picked mostly the really large districts. We found that they weren't as useful of comparisons because we don't look as much like a lot of them. The New Yorks, the Chicagos, the LAs, they get a lot of funding. We don't. And so to do much in the way of comparison, we did include LA. We felt it was important. But we also wanted to find school systems from multiple states. If we look down at size closest to Clark County School District and some other attributes, almost all the peers were from Florida because they have large districts in Florida. They have countywide districts also. So we'd have one Florida district. We have 2 from Texas. We have 1 from North Carolina, 1 from California. So we wanted state representation. We wanted, you know, some districts who looked like us or more like us financially, as well as kind of looked like us from a student perspective. We also wanted the urbanicity. We wanted to be large districts that had a large urban area in the middle of them. And so we had input into the process. The district had input into the process. We made the final selection. I also want to say that it's important that the peer districts were used primarily for completing the information in the appendices. So you'll see a few examples of analyses that are transported or copied from the appendices into our actual report. But that doesn't happen very many times. So most of the peer information is really contextual information. And we did, in our research, we did learn there were some practices that some of the districts were doing related to an operational recommendation that I thought was kind of interesting as a benchmark. But so we didn't lean on the peer comparisons for the work. We leaned on your data for the work, and where it was meaningful, like in the LRE data, we wanted to, that was a meaningful peer comparison. We did it in some other areas of our work. But those are the main factors: size, student demographics, urbanicity, and then we also were looking for school systems that either financially looked like us or academically may have shown some improvement in recent years, and so that was the basis for our selection. I'll pause and see if Kathy has anything to supplement.
Only that we used a very quantitative approach to select the peers, so all of those factors were taken into consideration at once. And that I think the real differentiator was the per pupil funding. I think that's why most of the peers that were selected ended up being in Florida and Texas. So we did a little conversation with the district to narrow down to that last 5.
I think question 2 was for.
No, it's for Jennifer.
The short answer,
We do have that information. It's explained in the report, and then there's also data to show the increase in the special education population in the appendix, in the appendices items that goes into further detail. So all of that should be explained more so in the appendices, but a brief of where that percentage point that came approximately over 3,000 more students that you have increased, with a large group being attributed to being students with autism.
And to address the third question, Trustee Bustamante Adams, the students are identified by us providing lists to them of students that are no longer in regular attendance for a long period of time, and they're the ones that do reach out to them and get them back in and enroll them into their program. As far as related to the funding, we do provide them 90% of the per pupil in order to fund their education while they're in the Acceleration Academy.
Thank you, Madam President.
Trustee Dominguez.
Thank you, Madam President. I really appreciated the report because it was very detailed. And so I did want to point out here, page 8 on reference C was that the consulting team had validated the existence of strong curriculum and high quality instructional materials being used at CCSD. So I appreciated that because we spent a lot of money on that. And so I really wanted to talk about this implementation of the Tier 1 instruction. So we don't, my question is, are we going to be spending money, or how are we going to be implementing the instructional feedback to make sure those Tier 1 instructions is being done correctly?
I can start, and then I think the administration can speak to the how in terms of next steps. I think the important distinction here is the curriculum being used versus being used as it's intended and being used really effectively. And so the cost that you've put into the materials you're providing it's being used really, really well. So the materials are there, teachers are using them. Overall, they're really happy with the math curriculum, specifically in elementary school. We heard that from teachers. I think the distinction is now that we've invested in the materials themselves, we've put them in teachers' hands, we've to some extent communicated that that's the vision for instruction, and it's not. The vision is what are the high-quality, research-based instructional practices that bring the student experience and the student learning to life? And that is the gap right now. As far as the how, the recommendations we've made, like very clearly defining what strong math curriculum is, math instruction is, what strong literacy instruction is, and then focusing all of our improvement efforts and supports around those things are going to be really critical. So to give a really concrete example, the HMH materials that we have adopted in foundational skills instruction, which is K through 2, teaching students how to read, they have explicit instruction as a major component of the materials. But if teachers don't understand what explicit instruction is, why it's so important, and how to effectively do it in the classroom, the materials won't get us to student impact.
Yeah. No, I see, and I guess I'll wait for the implementation part of it to see if we are going with a third party or how that feedback is going to be happening. My next question was for the professional learning. We do have a lot of professional learning with our instructors, with our principals, with administrators. I'm sure you've gotten the list of all of the professional learning they have done and are doing and coming up in the summer. Is that going to be, are we moving in a different direction? Do you want additional, basically, are we asking for additional professional learning, more money on that front end? Or are we going to be cutting some to kind of offset the cost?
I can speak to the recommendation, and then if the district wants to speak to the how of your question, the recommendation is to narrow the focus. Overall, if I were going to narrow down to like one trend, we've got to prioritize and narrow the focus for leaders, for teachers, and for our district administrators. And so having a lot of professional learning is different than having really focused, high-quality, practice-based, content-specific professional learning. And one of the things that we've included in our recommendations and findings in the report is the need to reduce fragmentation. And so all of our recommendations are not intended to be an additional initiative and another thing on our school leaders, another thing on our teachers. They're intended to improve what already exists so that we can focus on what's most important, which is teaching students and student outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so moving on to special education. So if we go to page 26, reference C, I had something that I highlighted here. Okay. I was looking at kind of just actively, and these are really great, like very ambitious, right? And we hear a lot from the special education community. And it says actively seeking solutions to gradually reduce caseload maximums for special education teachers. What would that look like if we had a third party, or are we having, how could we reduce the caseload?
This is really talking about looking at the staff that you currently have. Taking and looking at how they're being utilized, looking at some of your programs, how they're developed, how many students you actually need to be in a particular program, and having to see what you could really shift. It's really doing that analysis of changing, as the recommendations were, of how do we provide inclusion and co-teaching? What would that take from this staff to get to there at this point? And then if we have autism programs, what are the criteria for entrance into an autism program? It's not about having the disability of autism. It's about exhibiting characteristics in your IEP and needing services that have specific delivery. And so once some of the structure recommendations that we made, if that's what you choose to do and you put those in place, then you really need to start looking at your staffing allocation and seeing, do I have paraprofessionals in inclusion? Do I have the right amount of students? Too many students in resource. Where are my supports needing to shift? Do I have an autism classroom that only has 3 students in it, but I have 3 teachers in there or 2 teachers in there? And so, or do I have a classroom of general ed students that I have 1 student with disabilities, but I have 14 students in another class? And really balancing out that shift to make that determination. So that's why we started with the broad recommendation and vision setting and programming and structure, and really working on delivering those services in that manner. Then you can really see how you need to shift your staff. There are other recommendations that would come, but at the point now you have to kind of take that approach on how you're going to shape that for your programs in your district. And that's a district decision on how you do that.
Did that address your question?
It did, absolutely, and I just, I don't have any more questions, but the other thing I saw here was that it's aligning the position titles with elementary resource special education teachers with the secondary teacher titles. I mean, that alignment is huge, and I know it sounds like just titles, but it really is that transition from, middle school to high school is where it's been missing. So I've had a lot of special education parents that have told me that there's a missing link somewhere, and so I really appreciate that alignment.
I appreciate that recognition, that continuity in services, and it makes a big difference. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Esparza-Stopperkin.
Okay. So I'm looking at slide 14 of 40. And what is glaring when I look at special ed, and what you just alluded to, is that we have students that are not having and receiving the least restrictive environment. And I'm looking at other districts that are doing it. So my question is, is it, you just mentioned potentially restructuring staffing. It could be training that's lacking. It could be the placement. It could be we have high-functioning autistic students with abilities that should be in a gen ed class. So I would like to know, in our implementation phase, and it's more for the district, are we going to be having conversations with these other districts that are doing more inclusive practices?
Thank you for that question. Yes, the team's going to, the team will, as we dig into these and in the implementation phase, we'll be taking a look at all the data, different ways that other districts are increasing the use of, or the time that the students with disabilities are spending in the general education classrooms.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to kind of point out that glares in our face right there, that graph. And then the second part too in the report, it's deep in the report, don't ask me what page, is not only a mention of about a specialized educational instructional facilitator at a school, but there's another position that was mentioned. I don't know if you recall that it was something that was kind of new. So could someone allude to what would that look like, which would be a separate role?
Special education facilitators, I think I would like to go actually look at the text and the report and respond to you, but they were doing functions really beyond their intended role. And so we would like to get them back to their core purpose. I don't recall the other position title, so I would have to do some work unless Jennifer knows what that particular position is referenced, but we might need to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, I apologize that
It's a reference to an exceptional children education specialist.
Yes.
Okay.
That is a similar position to a CEF. And you are correct, Greg, it was communicated to us that more often the CEF is working through compliance rather than instructional facilitation. And of course, we noted that in the report.
And to actually answer your question, they were referring to Broward County, that is a position that is similar to a CEF here in the Clark County School District.
Thank you for that. If I may, Madam President, I don't see anyone else. Satori, do you mind if I take one more question? Sure. Okay. So I'd like to move to ELL. So my question about that is, and thank you for highlighting, and it's true, you know, what the gap is wide and unacceptable. And over time, 10 years, I mean, that is just concerning. We do have pilot programs in the district for dual language programming. And it was also mentioned in a subparagraph on page 31 and 32 that pending funding, pending resources, there could be potential expansion. So in addition to that being potentially a consideration, what are the other root causes that you are seeing with over a long period of time for us to not have the proficiency for our ELLs or multilinguals?
Thank you for acknowledging the dual language component. Just to restate what is in the report, we still believe that dual language should be the long-term goal for multilingual programming in the district. CBLI is an immediate to near-term improvement that the district can make to improve outcomes for ELL students. So we wanted to kind of phase it in, so to speak. To your question about other root causes, I think, at the risk of restating what's on the slide, the idea of having a programmatic add-on as this ESL model that we have in place currently, as opposed to a tier 1 instruction, we have language objectives for everyone in our classroom, regardless ELL or not ELL, is going to be the biggest one, potentially the hardest obstacle to overcome, but also the highest leverage move that we can make when we talk about improving outcomes for ELL students.
Thank you for that clarity. And hence why I say deja vu, because language objectives and content objectives have been around for quite a long time. And once implemented with, you know, supports and with, we know that scaffolding will definitely yield results. I'll put myself back in the queue.
Trustee Satori?
Thank you. So I understood what you were saying about that there's not a, there is not a cost savings on the educational recommendations. There actually is a cost for them in general, for some of them. So that's kind of my question of, you know, obviously there are things we could put in place that we know would increase student outcomes, such as, you know, the increased PD and staffing and those areas. But, you know, how can we see kind of what those costs would look like just to know, can we fiscally do it?
Yeah, we just don't know enough about the variables yet and the extent of what specific actions need to happen in specific schools. And the district would have to go through that exercise to be able to compile those estimates. But you're correct. There are no educational savings for the educational recommendations. And the cost estimates, we're trying to focus on resource reallocation first, and then obviously funding, particularly for your ELL population. When I looked at how much was being spent, even 5 years ago, I was really kind of appalled at how little money that the state puts into bilingual. And 10 years ago, we didn't even have, we were just at the early stages of weighted funding for these kids. So I think that answered your question.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
You good? That's it? Okay. I actually have one last question. The Acceleration Academy, you have, looks like 3 implementation strategies. One of them was the monitor the progress, and then it shows all the things that you plan to monitor. And it appears that you would probably have to monitor the progress in these areas before you did the first 2 recommendations. I would assume you want more information, data on that progress. My question to you is, do you know what that timeline would look like? Like how long we plan to continue monitoring the progress on these items before we start developing the next those implementation strategies?
I mean, I'll answer the general timeline question. Is we did not put the district on the hook for timelines because there are lots of other strategic initiatives going on as we speak. So we didn't want to say, oh, you need to do this in 6 months. Well, we're not in a position to be able to say you can do it in the next 6 months. So we made the recommendations. We defined the implementation strategies that will help you get there, but it's really going to be up to the district to set this to a calendar.
President Stevens, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that we are going to begin the implementation strategies on this recommendation this coming school year.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Esparza-Stoffergen.
Thank you for letting me come back. So I did have a last question about Acceleration Academy. If I misheard it, what is the cost that is expected per student when they go and then they enroll into the academy? There is a cost, right, per student that would exit a high school to go into Acceleration.
We're spending $20 million a year now to educate just over 2,000 students. I think that comes out to about $10,000 a student. And then the funding is described in the report, about the 90% that was referred to earlier.
So I know that my colleagues get tired of me saying these things, but I was a high school principal when Acceleration Academies were introduced to the district. High school principals at that time saw not a value, and I apologize to anyone who has utilized it because maybe they have found value, but the work that's closest to the school and to be able to not lose, you said 2,000 students or potentially up to that are potentially not finishing. I just feel like there's a correlation between some of our students that we are losing when they leave our campus. And so I'm sorry I'm a little bit passionate about this, but really this is something I think that's been long overdue for them to be putting it back on the campus. So my question is for the district. You may have leaders that don't know anything other than maybe not having used Acceleration Academy. How are we going to transition them to be able to create plans for those students to re-enter or to be successful because of the fact that they are so credit deficient?
And great question, Trustee Esparza-Stoffergen. So once again, we are looking forward to digging into these and coming up with our implementation of this. But I do want to share that we did have some preliminary information regarding this report, and this strategy is actually in alignment with. This recommendation is in alignment with our strategic plan, specifically Priority 1, Priority 3, academic excellence, and safe and supportive environments. And so we will be working directly with our principals so that if we do move this work back to the high schools, that they will be greatly supported so that they can provide the correct and the right environment for our disengaged youth, so that we can re-engage them in a meaningful way, so that they do have that academic excellence waiting for them.
Okay, before we move on to the next section, I just want to check in one last time with Trustee Bustamante Adams. Do you have anything else on these items?
No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I will invite my operations team to come up, operation team leaders. Thank you, education team leaders. While they're coming up and sitting down, I want to back up to the fiscal impact table. When this was released to you last Friday, since then, we've changed the sequencing of how we were going to present this. And so to split it up into two components and cover questions for each. This is the estimated savings, annually recurring general fund savings by area. And you'll hear more about how we developed recommendations that we believe will can yield these estimated savings. But you'll see that, we're going to talk about each of these, but the range for each is $8.5 million to $20 million annual savings. And so I wanted you to see this table, know that it's referenced. There's also the list of all the recommendations up at the front. But that's why I skipped over this, is because it really relates to the operational areas, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So I'll pause and let the two operations team leaders introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Tasha Prieto with Prismatic Services. I led a team of 9 Prismatic consultants who are not here today, but who reviewed a number of your operational areas, including food services, facilities management, transportation, some aspects of class size allocations, and instructional technology.
Thank you. I'm Ali Thailam with Gibson Consulting Group. I'm Chief Information Officer of Gibson Consulting Group. I participate in the technology function review of this report, along with Tasha and Prismatic. Okay. I'll kick us out with this slide. We'll focus on the software and licensing portion within the technology function. You can see in the bottom of the chart shows us the software spending all funds over 5 years. The dark blue portion represents general fund spending. As you can see, the amount increased from $20.6 million to 2021 to $48.1 million 24-25, more than doubling over that period. A portion of that increase reflects the software purchases that were previously funded through ESSER funds now have shifted into the general fund. While general fund software and licensing spending has more than doubled, the district does not have a centralized way to manage its software and licensing. There is no single system to track what software is owned, how licenses is used, when subscriptions are coming for renewal, or whether the same product is being purchased from more than once across departments or schools. For example, the analysis we found that multiple departments independently purchased the same product, software, across different years with totaling spending over $25 million without a coordinated procurement approach. In addition, across the district, there are multiple software options in the same area like math or reading, which can create inconsistencies across schools with students encountering different platforms that make it harder for teachers to assess their learning needs. Because of these gaps, the technology department cannot be fully accountable for and may not be in a position to support software purchases that are made outside its visibility. Recommendation 5 addresses these conditions and by establishing a centralized software asset management program. This provides the district with a single, consistent way to track what software we own, how licenses are used, and when subscriptions are coming for renewal. It also brings the software purchasing under a coordinated process, so the decisions are based on an existing license and actual usage rather than being made independently across departments and schools. With that structure in place, now the technology department has clear visibility into software purchases and can support those systems. From an implementation standpoint, there are 4 steps we're recommending. First, the district creates a complete inventory of all software and licenses, and then establish clear approval for purchases process. Second, it implements a system to track software usage and renewal date across district. Third, software purchases and renewals are revised based on actual need and usage rather than being automatically renewed. And finally, the district uses the data to eliminate duplicate software, reduces unused licenses, and improve vendor contracts.
Hey, guys. The team just asked me to remind you, if you don't mind, stating your name for the record, just so we have proper minutes. Thank you. It's okay.
Okay.
Go
Ali Thailand, for the record.
Dr. Tasha Prieto, for the record. In reviewing the Transportation Department, we found the biggest opportunities for cost savings within the routing and fleet composition areas. We determined that from looking at planned loads in the district's routing software. We also confirmed that with a ridership sample of 199 runs from December and January. What we found based on the 199 run sample was 56% utilization of the available bus seats. This means that of the 124,000 students eligible to ride, only about 70,000 want to ride. This year, the department has implemented new routing software. This new system will likely provide substantial benefits in the coming years. However, there are further improvements possible in routing. The district currently routes using eligible riders, like most districts, then overloads to adjust for actual ridership. Current routing procedures and approaches limit how full each bus is on each run. This includes inconsistent use of overbooking practices, not using driver-reported data to continuously refine runs and routes, and the inclusion of many students with disabilities on special education-only buses who could be assigned to buses that are currently general education only. Intertwined with the routing issue is the fleet mix. The district has 1,775 buses. Of those, 945 are wheelchair-accessible buses, but the district currently has just 372 students needing a wheelchair-accessible bus. The wheelchair-accessible buses are generally the same size from the outside as your general education buses, but because of the wheelchair spots and the district practice of seating one student with disabilities per seat, they hold far fewer students, even though they cost more to buy and maintain. By reducing from majority wheelchair-accessible bus inventory to better match needs, the district will gain more seats per vehicle at a lower cost. To tackle these challenges, we recommend reducing both general education and special education routes by 10% and 25% respectively. This would lead to an overall reduction in fleet size, particularly the wheelchair-accessible fleet. It would not affect student access to transportation or exceed ride time limits. To do this, we recommend implementing opt-in so that we don't have to save a seat for students whose parents are always going to drive them in anyway. We also recommend reinstating the pilot project and moving as many students with disabilities to general education bus routes as possible. Even if we have to provide a home stop or a bus aid for a student with disabilities on what was formerly a gen ed only route, the net cost savings is large, and the result is in keeping with the federal requirement for a least restrictive environment for those students. Combined with making improvements to routing procedures via the new software, the district will realize the anticipated savings. In reviewing the CCSD facilities management function, we looked at maintenance, custodial, construction, grounds, and planning areas. We found opportunities for cost savings in a number of areas, with the best opportunities in three, the first of which is facilities maintenance. There are two basic types of facilities maintenance, preventive and reactive. Preventive maintenance, or PM, includes all the things you do to prevent a breakdown, replacing filters on a schedule, cleaning condenser coils, changing compressor oil, etc. Reactive maintenance, or RM, is all the work you have to do in reaction to a building component or equipment failure. District leadership has been aware of the need for a greater emphasis on PM for a number of years, but has thus far not shifted its workforce to provide an appropriate level of focus on it. In the 2023-24 budget, an additional $10 million was allocated to address PM needs. However, the district did not track whether all this was spent on PM activities. Its computerized maintenance management system includes some details about PM work, but district staff noted and we observed PM work order completion is not always tracked. Not all assets needing PM are tracked in the system. Sometimes a PM task may be completed with an RM task, but is not noted in the system. Not all work orders contain a categorization as to whether they are PM, RM, or a mixture of the two. The lack of focus on PM results in higher RM costs. Industry data indicate that for every dollar spent on PM, you save at least $10 in RM spending later. This cost relationship shows up in the Council of Great City Schools data. In 2022-23, CCSD had a routine maintenance cost of $1.73 per square foot, compared to a median quartile cost of $1.35 per square foot. Looking at major maintenance costs, CCSD was $370 per student, which was well higher than the median quartile cost of $55 per student. Moreover, CCSD's routine and major maintenance costs per square foot have increased substantially each year and in comparison to Council of Great City Schools peers. Next slide. To address this, we recommend the creation of teams who will only complete PM assignments. A portion of the existing staff could be reassigned to these teams, perhaps supplemented with internal positions created from shifting some current expenditures on external contracts for PM. The leaders for each team should document specific PM procedures and their required frequencies. For example, how often should AC filters be changed, condenser coils cleaned? All PM tasks should be input into the maintenance computer system as a work order and the completion status tracked. The second finding in the facilities management area is the potential for cost savings via the incorporation of a number of construction best practices that ultimately result in reduced facilities operational costs. At the time of our on-site work, the district's facilities design manual was in the process of being updated. The currently used version from 2016 lacked requirements to use several procedures known to reduce the overall cost of a building. These best practices include value engineering, which is all about finding lower cost ways to deliver a building throughout the entire cycle from initial planning onward. It provides the highest savings when applied before the project gets to the construction document stage. Lifecycle costing is about understanding that the cheapest option initially may not be the cheapest option over the life of the building or vice versa. My favorite example of this is terrazzo flooring. It's not the cheapest installation option for flooring, but there's a reason it's widely used in airports. It has a lifespan of 75+ years, and properly cared for, it'll look fabulous the entire time, but it's definitely not the cheapest initially. Post-occupancy evaluation is the process of bringing together all building occupants, constituents, 6 to 18 months after a building is opened, and meticulously reviewing the building's performance. This allows the district to determine what actually works as advertised and what should be avoided next time. Industry data indicate 4 to 8% savings in CIP costs from using value engineering in early construction stages, plus indirect later savings in operation and maintenance costs. Industry data also indicate annual operations and maintenance savings of 5 to 20% from life cycle costing and post-occupancy evaluation. Next slide. To achieve these cost savings, we recommend outlining what these best practices will look like in CCSD, updating the design manual to require their use, and then piloting the new methodologies with 2027-28 projects. Success can be measured by tracking a number of metrics, including operating savings achieved, the completion rate for post-occupancy evaluations, and trend in occupant complaints. The third and final finding in the facilities management area is the potential for cost savings via benchmarking energy consumption. The district utilities spend is more than $83 million a year from general funds. The historical data indicate a fair amount of usage variance year to year and a rate of spend that exceeded inflation. Some of the variation could likely be explained by aging infrastructure, increased square footage, climate fluctuations, or other similar factors. However, it's not possible to determine whether the district is currently minimizing its energy consumption because it does not engage in a deep drill-down analysis of costs to understand whether factors completely beyond its control are at work or whether there are things that could be done to reduce energy consumption. For example, the observed peaks in electricity consumption suggest HVAC overuse, but absent drill down to individual site usage over time, the district cannot determine where specifically such overuse is occurring so that it can be curbed. When we reviewed electricity spend data by grouping schools by total square footage, we found substantial variation within the various size categories. This could be due to overconsumption by some schools via inefficient user habits or poorly maintained equipment. However, if there is excessive electricity usage in a specific school, the district currently lacks the systems to identify and address the problem. In 2024, the district announced the second phase of a vendor contract for retrofits and upgrades that should reduce utilities consumption. However, that work does not replace the benefits the district can gain from performance benchmarking. Under performance benchmarking, a more granular analysis of energy use could be compared, similar buildings, to industry standards to identify opportunities to reduce consumption. Industry data indicate that things like behavioral changes, adjusting how many lights are left on during nighttime cleanings, and finding and repairing small leaks can lead to substantial energy savings. Overall, the industry data indicate that savings of 10 to 20% are realistic. Next slide. To reap these savings, we recommend that the district hire a benchmarking manager to focus on energy use minimization. The district should take advantage of the free Energy Star portfolio manager tools available from the U.S. Department of Energy to compile and analyze energy use intensity data at the school site level over time. And finally, the district should develop a regular process to recognize top performing schools in energy use minimization.
Thank you, Tasha. The last three recommendations I will be discussing, the first of which is indirect cost recovery. Indirect cost recovery is a technical term, but it is a neat mechanism that the federal government allows in its grant programs such as Title I, also the food services program are two kind of really good examples of where indirect cost recovery can occur. What indirect cost recovery is the general fund's ability to recover the costs that it incurs for the benefit of these federal programs, but they don't otherwise get paid for it. These federal programs don't directly contribute to the cost, even though if we hire staff through the Title I program, their payroll would be paid by the district's human payroll department. Human resource needs would be addressed by the Human Resources Department. So Title I programming is a supplement, not supplant program, and so it is eligible only for administrative type costs that I just described. Other programs, it's really the food service program, you can also recover operational cost, like utilities, waste disposal, that type of thing, where we actually incur an operational burden. So if we don't do cost recovery, if we didn't provide these services, the Title I programs and the food services program, they would have to incur cost to do these on their own. And so it's more efficient for the district to provide these because they're providing them for everybody else, but we're not maximizing the mechanism that can be used to basically recover the cost to the general fund and break even. So we can do this through two rates. So for like title funds, we can use what's called the restricted rate. It's limited to the administrative expenditures. For food services, it's the administrative plus operational indirect cost. That's called the unrestricted rate. So what we did is we looked at the rates that you are doing some indirect cost recovery. So it's not like you're not doing anything. And but when we look at the when you look at the restricted rate and the unrestricted rate for Clark County, and we compared them to your peers, we're like 1/6 of the peer average on the unrestricted rate, and 1/2 or less in most cases on the restricted rate. So this means that the general fund is really not recovering all the potential funds that it should and could, because they are providing these services on behalf of these programs. So the recommendation is to maximize indirect cost recovery. And the first step is to renegotiate the indirect cost rates, because the state is involved. While this is driven primarily by federal regulations, the state is involved, and you have to go through the state to renegotiate your indirect cost rates. And so we haven't left town yet, and your district is already pushing forward to develop and try to renegotiate these rates to get them to be closer to what's actually due. This could have ripple effects, and so we wanted to give you some implementation strategies that would ensure that the food service program could absorb these indirect costs. As of the end of the last fiscal year, you had a fund balance in your food service operation that was more than 100% of your operating expenditures. That was actually by design, and that also goes through the state. The federal law requirement is 25%, and Nevada school districts can pick 25, and they can go up as high as they want, but it has to be approved. Well, they've begun the scaling down process to get it closer to the 25%. So that needs to happen, and but to protect the fund balances, what we don't want to have happen is we allocate indirect cost, and then 2 years later, we're run into a negative fund balance situation in food services, and we have to invest general fund money in it anyway. So we put an implementation strategy, or really a few, based on Tasha's work in food services, that should help sustain your profitability. Last year, the food service operation lost money. You still have plenty of fund balance, but we need to do some things that will sustain the long-term viability of the food service operation, but also being able to maximize the indirect cost recovery. For title funds, it's a different story. There's no really fund balance that is at risk. But what we're basically doing is over time, we're going to reduce the amount of money that's spent on direct services, and a portion of that needs to be spent on indirect services. So we didn't want to just flip the switch and do that overnight. And so we collaborated with the district, and we're going to allow for a planning period so that over time, these title programs can plan for this transition so that we can do the indirect cost recovery, because we should, but it's not going to adversely affect services. The next recommendation has to do with the efficiency measurement. The budget process, which you are familiar with, we looked at the process and the instructions given to department heads and program leaders, and it focuses, in fact, the letter that goes out says, this is what your budget was last year. We need you to, there's going to be a plus or minus to that budget, and so we need you to make that plus or minus work. That almost doesn't force, but it really supports or reinforces an approach that just looks at the margins of your budget. Efficiency measurement, and really the lack of efficiency measurement, which is, I think, one of the reasons we're here, is that efficiency measurement looks at the entire budget. So you're not just focused, and your department heads aren't overly focused on the increments up or down, because if you just focus on that, you're assuming that the budget that you have is fine, and you don't know that unless you do this efficiency measurement system. So we are suggesting, in fact, we built a data dashboard for you as part of this project that has a lot of metrics in it that can be used going forward. In fact, Ali worked 2 days ago to transfer this data dashboard over to you and help get that set up for success with your staff. And so we believe this will really help jumpstart the program. The other thing about this area of efficiency measurement is that the district sometimes does official, formal program evaluations. The term academic return on investment is a term that's commonly used when you compare the academic outcome with the financial investments. Some of our programs, or I think a lot of our programs, are granular enough in nature that, but large enough to where we want to know how much we're spending on those programs. We don't always have the program account codes at a low enough level to be able to track those costs. If you use the funding code, and let's say we started something with Title I, but then we end up taking it on ourselves, that title code is no longer going to be meaningful because that doesn't include the full cost. So we do have program codes, but we can create program subcodes that would help us track these expenditures so that when we do the program evaluation, you can actually see the academic return compared to the financial investment for that program. The recommendation is to do this. We want to incorporate this not just into your budget process, but also into the budget reporting. So imagine when you look at the budget in future years, and you're not only looking at the increments of we're going up or down this much, that you actually get a holistic view of each program and department in terms of its level of operating efficiency. Is it trending up or trending down? And then you can actually use performance targets to actually drive your budget. How can we get more efficient? What do we have to do to become more efficient in the future? So the establishment of low-level account codes will help, and then right now your budget department staff is pretty much devoted to a pretty cumbersome process just to produce the budget. And so you've got a tool now called AllaView that's going to really help, we think, streamline and improve the reporting and decision-making for your budget process. But over time, we think you could reassign some of the specialists, budget specialists, to more analyst-type positions that can really do the deep analytical work to support your departments in analyzing these efficiency metrics. The last recommendation relates to developing a decision authority framework. And this recommendation really can influence others that we've talked about today. The state guidance for decision-making has changed a lot over the last 10 years. In 2015, Assembly Bill 394 transferred a lot of the responsibility from the district level to the school level. In 2025, Senate Bill 460 repealed much of this statute, shifting the framework so that authority is now transferred to the schools only under the what's deemed necessary by the superintendent. So that was a pretty big shift. We are still doing site-based budgeting, and we're not here to tell you you need to centralize this or centralize that or decentralize that. We're really focused on having you document your major decisions in the district. And so we think that developing a framework, and we included one in the report. I don't know if you noticed, after the very last thing in the report is a table that splits decision-making up into 4 possible attributes. The school gets to make the decision. The school gets to make the decision from choices established by the district. The school gets to make a decision, but it must be approved by the district, or the district makes a decision. And so you may come up with more options, and you can expand this. I would start kind of high level and figure out what's made, by the superintendent, at the region level, at the campus level, and then as you might migrate into more detailed areas. But just having this framework and having everybody on the same page about what the decisions are made at what level. And we've given you a long list of variables that need to be considered when you're doing that. For example, is there a compliance? Is the decision relate to any kind of legal or regulatory compliance? Does the decision influence the cost of the impact of the decision? So we did work in Los Angeles schools years ago. They actually had a policy that said, schools, you can do whatever you want, but if it costs more money, you've got to pay for it. And so that policy wasn't very well enforced in LA at the time, but that's an example of how you can use this decision-making framework and look at it from all these different aspects. Technically, who should be making the decision? From an accountability standpoint, if the district's accountable for this result, should that be delegated down? But again, we're not endorsing centralization or decentralization of any particular decision. We are suggesting that you write it down so that everybody will be on the same page. And after you write it down, the job descriptions need to be aligned with it. Your labor contracts might need to be modified to be aligned with it, but that'll just help get everybody on the same page. We are now ready to entertain questions for any of the operational recommendations.
Thank you so much. I'll open it up to my colleagues. I just have one question that this might be a question for you. But so on the transportation side, you wanted one of the recommendations was reduce size of bus fleet. We recently approved, I think it was like 20 million, to replace buses that were outdated, and legally, we have to replace them. Do you know if we've already done that? Do we know how many buses, like, we may not know this yet, but how many less buses we're going to need if we're going to reduce the fleet? Is that being considered? Did we already purchase them? Just trying to understand that part.
Thank you so much for the question. Yeah, that has not yet been determined because this is a very big recommendation, and it is going to take us quite a few years to implement this. This is one of the recommendations where they said that it would take up to 5 years to actually implement.
Trustee Zamora?
Thank you, Madam President. My question is also about transportation. Can I ask why recommending an opt-in option over an opt-out?
So there are many possibilities with it, and actually, we've seen school districts that call it opt-in, but it's really opt-out. It is, we think, easier position to begin to ask student parents, are you planning to use the bus or not? Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. There are other places that you could ease into something like this. For example, if a student gets a parking pass, they're going to be driving their car. We could then say, okay, you've opted out of transportation. The terminology is across the industry is fairly loose, opt-in, opt-out. Some people avoid the terminology of opt-out only because it sounds negative. But I like to use the analogy of all services are available to you. You need to tell us if you want a ride, just like football team is available to you. You need to tell us if you want to participate on the football team. We've seen progress with school districts that use an opt-in process to begin with, and in places where they do not get a definitive answer from those parents, they're just automatically opted in. Until we hear otherwise, that you've told us what your decision is, you're just considered still eligible.
Interesting. I really appreciate the final report. That, it really goes into detail about the transportation, some of the data you all have, and just watching students come off and on the bus. I think one thing I did not see is there's a lot of stories of family members who get really frustrated with just our communication from the district, right? And sometimes my child does not take the bus. We opted out of doing that, but I still get notifications that there's a late bus running. So I know it's more of a system thing that we have to work on. I would love to for our team superintendent to figure out how we fix and deal with that situation first as we're talking about, I would like to say opt out, opting out families of the bus system, because a lot of it, there is family members that get to choose that and are saying, hey, I know I have this option, I'm opting out because I'm able to take my child to school, but I think it's just really important for us to just really focus on that communication from the district. The other part, no, that was it on me. Thank you.
Trustee Esparza-Stoffergen?
Thank you. So comprehensive. And I want to say thank you for actually turning something on that we can use already. So important for us, for technology. So I'll start with technology first. The amount was doubled, almost more than double, from 20.6 million to 48.1 million. So my first question is very minuscule. Was this inclusive of software that schools are using, or is this just central?
It was both, yes.
Combined. Got it. Okay, so that makes sense, but that number is just, wow. Okay. And I guess I don't need an answer. I just want to put this on record for our superintendent, that I know we have new leadership in technology at all levels. And the process for procurement and review and return on investment is key. I think in looking going forward is not just the utilization, the effectiveness, but are we going to renew? So I know that is implementation, but I just want to put that on record for a moment. All right, so I will go to transportation, and then I will put myself back in the queue. There was mention of a pilot program for potentially adding some special ability students back into gen ed busing. So would you elaborate a little bit more, because that is an area that I know parents might want to have more information. I appreciate the opt-in option, so it sounds like parents can opt in for this. It's not something that's going to be done automatically.
Yes, ma'am. The pilot program was actually reported on in the 2011 study, and in that limited study, they took a sample of students with disabilities and assessed their ability to transition to a general education route. 80% of the students in that pilot were able to transition. At the time that the Gibson study concluded, it sounded like it was going to be expanded outward. However, when we got here this time around, somewhere between then and now, it was not continued. So we're recommending a whole-scale re-implementation of the pilot.
Thank you for that, because I did see that in the 2011, another reason why I'm bringing it up. And then this is an instructional thing, which I think I know the answer. So we talked earlier about providing least restrictive environment. Is that considered part of the least restrictive environment, to have them inclusively ride the bus with gen ed?
Yes, ma'am. That is considered part of least restrictive environment. And so what we recommend, typically transportation is a related service within an IEP. However, the details of it need to be figured out. Does that student need only a home stop, which could potentially be accommodated on a general education route? Does that student need only an aide, which we have districts that are putting aides onto buses with that one student plus a general education population? Or does that student not tolerate well a large student environment and or need an extremely short ride time? Though that last group of students would be the students for whom the least restrictive and therefore appropriate environment would be a special education only run.
Thank you. Trustee Satori?
And thank you very much for that part of the presentation. Regarding technology, and I definitely understand as you talk about like hearing that there is no centralized tracking and how all of the licenses could be combined and consolidated makes complete sense. My question then is, what would the cost for such a program potentially be, and its implementation, and is that factored in?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. We included in our fiscal impact the software costs and the training and potential other costs in the first year. And we think that within 3 years, you will start gaining the entire benefit of it when we calculate it based on your spending right now with the percentage, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then one more question, if I may. When we discussed, the question was asked earlier about the comparison schools and kind of, how, and I understood like how those aligned in the educational component, but are the facilities of these same schools similar to our facilities, our environment, and those and age of buildings and such?
This is an example of where one set of peers doesn't fit every functional area extremely well. It's particularly different within the transportation realm because they have different constraints. But yes, there's a different level of age of facilities. Houston ISD's facilities tend to be older, and then the different climate environments in which they're operating as far as utilities costs related to that. So yeah, there are differences there. We did look at peer data for those areas, but again, that didn't drive the substance of the recommendation. It was simply contextual.
Thank you. Trustee Henry?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you all for the presentation. I had a question about transportation and wanted to know what safeguards will be in place to ensure transportation changes do not create additional barriers, like in attendance. I know that transportation has improved a bit, but we do still have parents who have complaints that buses are late. So.
Thank you for the question. I think that one of the pieces that should, an indirect result of making these improvements is we currently have a bus driver shortage. Every district across the nation has a bus driver shortage. So to the extent that we can reduce our need for route drivers by reducing the number of routes, we then open up the possibility that some of the drivers would stay on and expand the substitute pool. As there are days in this district where absences are as high as 20% for some of the driver areas, depending on which region you're looking at. And so that should improve service quality. I think that one of the pieces that we only touched on in the transportation finding is the district has been implementing a new routing software system. Through no fault of its own, the district was engaged with a routing system that went out of business, and so had to adopt a new routing software package. This software package, I think, has a lot of great promise as far as improving visibility into operations and as well as communicating with parents. It was not fully operational when we were here in February, but I understand it should be ready to go with the new school year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Barone.
Thank you, Madam President. To put this in perspective, what you just did with this efficiency study, if this were a city, CCSD by itself would be between the third and fourth largest city in the state of Nevada. We'd be competing with North Las Vegas and leaving Reno behind with a budget that dwarfs both cities combined, okay? Managing that amount of money is a task in and of itself. I'm just looking, I'm really impressed that we're not just looking at operations here, but we're actually looking at efficiencies in instruction delivery, which, is unprecedented. And so the first thing I want to do is congratulate our superintendent putting the team together to actually integrate both those needs. I guess I am really impressed here. Just bringing back, I guess, rolling back the administrative cost by bringing it back in-house here. Just with that is a recovery that has paid for this study in and of itself, right? Don't look now, but with that, investments, of course, in preventative care. These are things that again, we see time and time again where we can prevent so many issues by spending a little bit now. And hey, buy an electric toothbrush. You'll probably save a lot of money in dental work down the line. We're doing the same thing here. I guess the question that I have more than anything else, it is going to be like a living document where we'll be revising, we'll be looking at, and maybe on a timely basis, evaluating our processes here, and perhaps adding things to the efficiency. And again, I guess what I mean is by living document, the follow-up will be we'll be evaluating this thing on a timely basis, right? To see how effective our implementation are, and if we see other efficiencies that come up, we can kind of like address those as we go along, right?
Absolutely. We also noted that your district has a mechanism already in-house to track the progress of initiatives. It's run out of your strategy office. I think your strategic plan, many initiatives from your strategic plan are going to be there, and we hope that these 12 recommendations are monitored through that mechanism. So this is a really good mechanism, is the monitoring of the implementation and then collecting the evidence that demonstrates, one, that it's done, and two, that you're getting the value that you expected, whether it's financial value or educational value. And so we were thrilled to see that the district already has this infrastructure in place. And so we think that's going to really help keep this thing living, is that we're going to have to keep monitoring. But your other point about this data dashboards and some of these other recommendations may generate other savings opportunities. I fully expect that the decision-making framework will not only benefit things that we're recommending in Tier 1 or on the software asset management, but there may be other areas that savings can be achieved or other opportunities can be identified. So I think you're positioned really well to keep this thing live and really help ensure its implementation.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to a time not too far from now. Since I'm a child of the 1980s, I can do the Hannibal from the A-Team and tell and say and declare, we love it when a plan comes together.
Trustee Bustamante Adams, do you have anything?
Thank you, Madam President. Mine is on question page 3 and 34 about the indirect cost recovery. My questions are, is Medicaid an example of a program that would fit in this recommendation? My second is there only a certain window of time that would allow us to renegotiate the indirect rate? And the last question is, which state department would you negotiate with? Does it depend on the topic or the program? Thank you.
The first question, I don't know the answer to the Medicaid question. There are certain federal programs that are allowed for indirect cost recovery. Justin Dayhoff might be in a better position to answer really each of these questions because he's more familiar with the timetable for renegotiation and when that can occur. But, and then your last question, Trustee Barone, or I'm sorry, Trustee Bustamante Adams. What was your last question?
It had to do which specific state department would the district go renegotiate the indirect rate?
It's the Nevada Department of Education.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Bustamante Adams, this is Superintendent Ebert. In regard to your first question with Medicaid, those are two separate. Medicaid is separate reimbursement versus what we're asking for, the indirect costs here. And as Mr. Gibson had noted earlier, the team has already started to work with the Nevada Department of Education and is making great progress.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Trustee Esparza-Steffergan.
Thank you, Trustee Bustamante Adams. It's like we read each other's minds. I want to talk about the indirect recovery. I see on slide, hold on a second. The one with the graph, slide, what is it, 33? Yes, 33, thank you, President. It talks about other school districts that have established indirect cost rates better than ours. So higher. So what are they? I want to know the number. Like, what is that number that we should be negotiating for? Do we know?
You won't know. It's not a number that you pick. It's a number that you calculate. So you determine what costs are eligible for indirect cost recovery, and then you add them up, and then that becomes, you convert that to a percentage. So in some states, the calculations are actually done by the state based on the financial data that's submitted to the state. In Texas, the school districts do not calculate their own rates. The state calculates it from their detailed financial information. So it's certain account codes that get added together to come up with the information that feeds the indirect cost rates. We negotiate rates, so there's more of a burden on us to, develop the data beneath the rate, and then we negotiate that with the state.
So what is Nevada's process for that?
The process is they just have to go through, once they've done kind of their homework, they can open up negotiations. I don't know how the step-by-step process is, but they must get those rates approved. Okay. So it looks like Justin's coming in to really provide a better answer to that question.
Good afternoon, President, Member Superintendent Justin Dayhoff, Chief Financial Officer, for the record. Thank you for the question. As the Gibson Group correctly stated, the Nevada Department of Education has the delegated authority from the federal government on their behalf to negotiate the rates. What happens typically is we'll receive a notification from the department approving our rate for a given year. We submit our calculations to the department, and they approve those. We did not do that for the current fiscal year that we are in, fiscal year 2026. We don't have an approved letter from NDE. So for that reason, we sent official correspondence to the state superintendent, the Department of Education, indicating that we intended to reopen negotiations for this fiscal year, which we intend to conclude by June 30th, later this month.
Thank you so much for that clarification. It's an area that we are learning. It's unfortunate nothing's retroactive pay, so we won't get any of that other money that we lost. But we will, going forward, continue that process. I do have another question, but I see that Trustee Dominguez is in the queue, so I'll re-enter mine.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a few questions, and I'll let you go, Mr. Dayhoff. So my question started with the SAFE list, which I really appreciated. Would this be living in with purchasing or with IT?
The SAFE list currently, I believe, will live with technology, so they can determine if the data sharing agreement signed with the vendor, cybersecurity or safe vendor. But that alone cannot be our asset software solution. That's why we are indicating in the report that that's just the beginning of first step. Then we need to have a system and coordinate our efforts to get going with it, more than just the SAFE list.
Thank you. So like they could work together with purchasing.
Yes.
Got it, that collaboration.
I'm sorry I didn't answer that. Purchasing, Chief Financial Officers Group, and technology needs to work together in a steering committee or cooperative way, yes.
Amazing, thank you. My next question was for transportation. So for IEPs, 504s, is there going to be a review of students that possibly already have a 504, but let's say for example, maybe they broke their leg or they needed a door-to-door service, but now no longer need the service, but happens to still be getting the service?
That's a great question. Let me see. I wrote down some answers to that. So how the implementation might look is that the Student Services Department and the Transportation Department would work together to review their current process. Because right now, Transportation Department is implementing what it is hearing as student needs a ride on a special education only bus. However, there are pieces that don't seem to be in play, given the number of students that we have on the special education only buses. And what needs to happen is a more nuanced process to say that, yes, that student has a temporary 504 because they broke their leg. So now they do need a specialized ride. They need a ride on a special education only bus, what is currently available. But that has a limit. Right? And we will check in with that child, 2 months later to see if they have fully recovered or if we need to continue it. The same kind of level of detail needs to happen with most of the IEPs in place. The student may need transportation as a related service, but what other specifics? If the student requires a vehicle that has a wheelchair lift, then that becomes the solution. If the student only requires a home stop, the question then becomes, can that student, is the rest of the environment on a regular education run suitable for that student, and we just have to add the home stop for that student. So that's just a minor routing adjustment. So those are all the kinds of questions that need to be answered. And unfortunately, we need to answer those at the student level.
Got it, thank you. And for that, to follow up with the transportation, so I know they were using the routing system, I guess was not being utilized, or we had a switch, I think you said. Is it being reviewed every year, or do we just look at it maybe every 3 years or every 5 years to reroute?
Routing is a continuous process in any school district. Students move in and out of the district all the time. Students change schools within the district all the time. And so refining routes is a continuous process. The big work for a regular school year happens over the summer when you put into place your best guess as to the best set of routes for the year. But then you begin making adjustments to them on the first day of school. And I think that process, you've got a couple of pieces in place that are great. You do have your drivers who are providing feedback back to the district. in terms of which bus stops are being utilized and how many student counts they're currently doing that. What we have gotten away from in the last couple of years here because of this changeover in the routing system is we haven't been incorporating that feedback back in. And so once we get full routing implementation, we should be able to resume going, okay, this bus driver has reported, these 10 stops, maybe we can make some adjustments and have that be a living process. But yes, routing is a continuous all year round effort.
Got it, thank you. And I know I've asked 3 questions, so I'll defer to my colleague for.
Can we go to slide 38? I'm curious about this concept about the decisions being made, that this is a big shift, I think, and what I really wonder about, and I think what our communities are going to want to know, is we have school organizational teams that are comprised of families, students, teachers, administrators, even community members that are sitting on our school organizational teams. And they have to approve the final budget at each school. So what, if at all, would be in the process for including those decision makers with this new concept of laying out a new structure for decision making?
I'll go ahead and handle that. Specifically to the SOT requirements that you mentioned, that is required in law. So one thing I've always promised you, we will follow the law. So those pieces will continue. What I think is important on this one, and I will link it to the conversation in regard to special education and professional development and the system as a whole, right? We have pockets of excellence. And what we're trying to do is eliminate pockets of excellence that every school and every child has access to excellence. And in some instances, for instance, with special education, when I started last year, there were things that were brought to our attention and, saying, well, this isn't happening in this school, that school. And I said, well, where's the professional development? How are we providing? And in this specific area, it was optional. The professional development for federally required components were optional. So the superintendent took it upon with the team discussing that it was no longer optional, that everyone did need to attend to make sure we're all on the same page, providing 100%, no gaps in our services that we're providing to our children. That isn't documented at this moment in time. And so going through these pieces, and because of NRS 388G, right, and the changes that just happened less than a year ago, right through the last legislative session, all of those pieces need to be documented so there's no question on where that decision lies, that we can move quickly when when something new comes up and we know exactly where, and to collaborate across to make sure that we get the best services for our kids.
Thank you, Superintendent, for that clarity. And I know nobody probably read the 87-page report, but on pages 85 and 86, Trustee Dominguez did. Thank you, Trustee. There are examples, too, for how things can be decided, so I appreciated those specific examples. So I have a question for Gibson specifically. I looked at, and just because I like to look at other districts, I think we can learn a lot from how people are doing things. Like you just said, Superintendent, pockets of excellence. So on the 2014 Tucson Unified, you did a Gibson report, and this same concept was in there as well. So curious, what were some of the, I mean, it's 2014, we're 2026. Do you have any insight after having them implemented this structure of authority decision-making framework? Have you heard any anecdotal, or do you have any data about kind of insight from that structure being put in place?
No, I don't have any specific input related to Tucson. I will tell you that many districts struggle to get this done. Decision-making is not something people want to formalize and put in print. And it kind of depends on the superintendent, it depends on senior leadership, but your district seems to be excited about this recommendation and that it will provide clarity. It will help get things done in other areas, whether it's decentralized or centralized, everybody will know. And I think it's really going to help you move your strategic plan forward. But I get a lot of district leaders excited about this. I can't give you anybody that I think has done a successful job in actually implementing it. And it's really sad. And so I feel like it's not from a lack of, the implementation steps are not that difficult. It's the commitment that's difficult for a lot of districts to do, because they don't want to ruffle feathers. They want people to have flexibility. In some places, that flexibility is absolutely needed. But we believe this is really important, particularly given the number of initiatives and changes that are underway in your school system.
I just want to say thank you for putting that on record, because all of what we're trying to do is what's best for our students and our communities. So I think we just have to come back to that, and I appreciate you being honest and candid and just saying that you don't have that because it's a lack of commitment and implementation in other spaces and leadership. So thank you.
Trustee Dominguez.
Thank you, Madam President. I am on reference C, page 66. And I wanted to know if this chart included the grants that had been reimbursed to the district, or was this the district cost before grants or after grants? I wasn't clear on the graph here. And it's for everybody, it's for technology. I'm sorry, not technology, it's for the utilities.
This is looking at your actual usage data. You're referencing figure 22. This is actually usage data. It's not spend data or cost data.
It was for figure 21. It
figure
had
21, page
the
65,
cost
okay.
listed here and also the
Sorry.
the usage.
Figure 21 is utilities expenditures. It covers all funds.
Thank you. So does it include the grants that were recovered from that? Or is it just the cost?
It would cover just the costs, the expenses.
Okay, got it. And I saw there was a really big jump in some of these, so I was just concerned about, water and electricity. And I know there were a lot of grants that were recovered from there, so I was curious if they included that. So thank you for clarifying that. And one of the, just to end this maybe, is where do we go from here? Where's the phase from here? Where's our timeline?
Well, thank you for that question. So we, meaning CCSD, we're ready to get to work and start reviewing each of these recommendations and digging into the implementation strategies that have come along with these recommendations, and start looking at also the alignment to our strategic plan, and start taking a phased approach. What can we do right now, short term, medium term, and then long term?
Just on sidebar, will the board be updated on just as we move, or are we going to get our updates through the strategic plan?
Yes, you will be getting updated plans, just like you'd be getting updates on the strategic plan.
Got it. Thank you.
Trustee Bustamante Adams, do you have anything else?
No other questions. Thank you, Madam President. Just thank you to the superintendent and her staff.
Thank you. I want to actually turn it over to our superintendent, see if she has anything else she'd like to add on this.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Again, just gratitude for approving this work to be able to move forward. Huge thank you to the team and the schools and students, actually, that provided input into this process as well. They made sure that the schools were open, had open conversations. What was really exciting about this, at the same time we're doing our strategic plan, right? North Star, where we're headed. These are components that we need to work on. We know how to get better at getting better and leaning in on those pieces. And yes, I think several of you asked about the reporting piece. And that's the big lift in all of the, right? I'm sorry, gentlemen, but, and all of you. That really was the easy part, right? To identify, write it down, capture it. This is what we need to, this is what needs to happen for our system, for our children, for the community, all of that. And from here now, we have the pleasure of implementing. And so, marking out of these 12, because it is a system, they all work together, and I really appreciated Trustee Esparza-Strophigan in regard to the last question, because these all fit together, right? The special education with the decision-making framework, with the technology, with the instruction in the classroom. And so that's where we will all start digging in, rolling up our sleeves, and making that determination. And having it completed within 5 years. If we need to make adjustments, then we will report to you, to the community, of where those adjustments need to be made. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much. That'll close out 3.02. Thank you. With that, we would open 4.01, which is just an announcement, upcoming meeting of the Board of Trustees, Thursday, June 11th, 2026. Before I open 5.01, is there anyone who did not get a chance to complete a public speaker card or turn one in? Once I open this item, we will not accept any more public speaker cards. Okay. No. It's not an action item, so it goes here. All right, let's go ahead and open 5.01, public comments on items not listed on the action items on the agenda. First up, Ms. Fabian.
Trustees and Superintendent Ebert, for the record, my name is Elena Fabunan. I'm a retired CCSD educator, former principal, and District E constituent. I want to thank the district for commissioning this study. While much of the discussion has focused on operational savings, I believe some of the most important findings are about students, particularly our English learners and students with disabilities. One finding should give every trustee pause. According to the report, CCSD serves the lowest percentage of students with disabilities in general education settings among all peer districts studied. Not only are we last among our peers, but our inclusion rates have declined since 2020, while the number of students educated in more restrictive settings has increased. The report also raises concerns about consistency across specialized programs, including STAR, autism, and specialized learning disabled programs. Families should not have to wonder whether the quality of services depends on which school their child attends. Equally important are the findings related to multilingual learners. The consultants recommended implementing a content-based language instruction framework to address achievement gaps for English learners. As a district serving one of the largest multilingual populations in the nation, that recommendation deserves serious attention. The report found that only 39% of observed lessons demonstrated strong instruction. For multilingual learners and students with disabilities, access to grade-level content requires both rigor and support. These students do not need lower expectations. They need effective instruction, meaningful scaffolds, and access to high-quality learning opportunities. As the board reviews this report, I hope the conversation extends beyond efficiency and cost savings. I hope you ask, why are inclusion rates moving in the wrong direction? What specific actions will be taken to improve outcomes for students with disabilities and multilingual learners? How will its success be measured? And how will any savings generated through these recommendations be reinvested directly into the classrooms and student supports? Because efficiency matters, but the true measure of efficiency in a school district is not how much money is saved. It is whether every child, regardless of disability, language background, or zip code, has equitable access to rigorous instruction, meaningful inclusion, and the opportunity to succeed. The question before us is not whether we can operate more efficiently. The question before us is whether our systems are organized around adult convenience or student opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Binder?
almost finished my blanket. Thanks, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Ebert. And hopefully my battery doesn't die because I wrote it all down. I brought you guys a little handout because, and thank you so much, Trustee Ramona, because she actually read all the studies that I sent her. That was very clear today. That I sent to many of you last year when you guys were first voting on this. But what I'm really interested in is seeing some type of crosswalk from all of the suggestions over like the last 20 years. Because when I went through and analyzed the 2011 report to the 2026 one, and you'll see it here on page 2, all they did was change some words. We have the same needs, we have the same concerns, we're in the same place, and that's not, sorry, I talk with my hands. That's not anybody's fault here. It's an institutional problem. And so as much as we have Superintendent Ebert now, you guys are sitting here now, that changes over time, right? It could change next year with new trustees, potentially. It could change in 3-4 years. So what are we doing in 2026 as we roll out implementation to ensure institutional integrity as we make these improvements? It's all great that we have people in place that are going to implement it, but how do we make it survive history? Because if not, I'm going to be standing here in like 10 years and we're going to have another efficiency study because somewhere the ball is going to get dropped. So as you guys are moving forward with all of that, we really need to figure out how to bring that into our core, or it's just another wasted report, right? So I have that little handout for all of you. I know I do talk to some of you, and I do just really have to commend the new superintendent and the team because we're doing extraordinary work in special education. It's not all visible, obviously, to the public, but for what's going on behind closed doors is astronomical. It's nowhere that I've seen in my experience, and I think with where we're going with it, it is going to make so many things much better for our families. So, anyways, that's my concern, and I'm looking forward to the implementation talks and stages of it, and seeing how you guys can embed that in there. And I think that was it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Gomez.
David Gomez for the record, Nevada Peace Alliance president. First of all, I was here in 2011 in this exact same room when they did this report. It was with Dwight Jones. Nobody said that, but I was here when he did it, and it was under his rule. And Anna is right. All they did was change some information from the Gibson report from 2011. Just some words were changed. Nothing was changed. And I don't understand this. What I don't understand is, why do we keep hiring a company that didn't give us a solution the first time and then come back and give us vague ideologies about whatever they're going to start studying? We have UNLV. UNLV has public policy research. They have a lot of different things there that they can actually perform the duty because they've been watching us since day one. They've been taking care of all the information that they see, and they make sure they put it in reports. And they make it public for everybody readily. But we keep hiring somebody from Dallas, Texas that doesn't know who we are, don't know anything about what we do and how we do things. They don't know that in District D, we have 43 elementary schools, 12 middle schools, and 9 high schools. A total of 64 schools, including specialized centers and alternative programs. We have 11 of those. They don't know that 65% to 70% are Hispanic Latino, 15 to 20% are Black African American, 5 to 8% is Caucasian white, and Asian Pacific Islander is 3 to 5%, and 2 or more races is 3%. They don't know that. Why do I know that? Because I live here. You live here. We all live here. We understand that. But we keep hiring somebody that doesn't know who we are. I'm grateful that Trustee Ramona read the whole entire thing, because that makes me feel better that somebody is really paying attention to what is being implemented up here. That makes me feel a lot better. I wish that was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I'm proud of our superintendent. She's doing a really good job. When I said we needed a mama, we got one. And she's doing exactly what we expected her to do. I know people are not always going to be happy with her, but at the end of the day, she's doing what we asked her to do. this company, they can't even tell you when the bus was turned yellow and why they call it a big yellow bus. It was in 1939, and actually it's called a mango color. And that's what it actually is. And it was like a chromatic. So they don't even know that. But why do I know that? Because I care about education. I have 7 kids. So when we go looking for someone to tell us how to do our job, and we don't go in-house to figure out exactly what we have here that have been watching us this whole time, then we're doing the wrong job by bringing someone in that's going to tell us that very vague answers when you guys are asking questions about special ed. They don't know nothing about special ed out here as well. They just have metrics. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes 5.01. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Trustee Dominguez.
I'd like to motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Trustee Zamora.
I would like to second that motion.
Thank you. Let's vote. Trustee Bustamante Adams.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.